Welcome to Birdsong. I'm your host, Kai Kiora, and in this week's episode, we have Matthew J. Pallamary joining us. This was a fast-moving conversation, and Matthew's way of articulating himself and his flow of speech really had me pushing my own levels of cognition through trying to keep up with his rapid thinking. And it's always an interesting thing being here in the hot seat, being the host of a show and getting the conversation to flow smoothly and being present and always staying ahead in one sense and directing the dialogue in some manner while also staying sharp and trying to think off the cuff. So it's very much still an interesting thing for me to navigate, and I'm still a rookie, but in saying that, I'm finding these conversations really enlivening and enjoyable. Matthew is a down-to-earth, humble, friendly, give it to you how it is kind of guy, and I love that. We had an immediate connection, a great rapport, and like he puts it on the show, kindred spirits on a similar path. So a little bit of his bio before we get into things. He is a well-respected author, having published 15 books, receiving numerous awards. He is a speaker. He is a shamanic explorer with extensive knowledge on shamanism, in particular South American shamanism, and we dive right into the topics of shamanism and the process of writing in this conversation. So if you have an interest in either of these themes and subjects, I think you're really going to find some gems in this dialogue. Let's get straight into it. Thanks for being here, and I trust that you will find value in our dialogue to carry with you on your own path forward. I can't remember the first time that I came across your work. It might have been on James W. Jesso's podcast, Adventures Through the Mind, and you were talking about this notion that perhaps in an archetypal sense, we're all shamans. That might have even been the name of the episode. I can't remember.
Everybody's a shaman. That was the name of the episode.
There you go. Yeah, and since then, have come to explore a lot more of your work, and I've come to be quite inspired by a lot of your path in regards to walking the shamanic path on a deep level, your achievements as an author, having published 15, writing your 16th book at the moment, and receiving numerous awards, and then your ability to articulate yourself so well through whether it's through the digital world or up on the stage giving a speech. So this conversation for me is like a little learning session. Well, I mean, all conversations have that potential, but in this instance, it's because these are all things that I'm passionate about myself. So, or actively trying to improve, such as my writing or my speaking skills. But before I go on too much, like I said, I'm just grateful to be sitting down and having a conversation with you, mate. So thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me, and thank you for indulging me, because aside from yourself and your awesome energy, I just love you brothers from down under, man. You guys really get me. And everybody I've come in contact with has just been this really wonderful, expressive energy. And at some fact, I just love your accents. I always try to imitate it. I never do it right. I say, did I, Mike? You know? But I'm a fake. But I like to think of myself as an honorary Aussie. And I think I mentioned to you before, I was supposed to come down here to Melbourne in October. And to do some sound healing and some other ceremonial work, and that all got blown out of the water with this COVID craziness. Mm-hmm. So, but you guys are really in my heart, and if I start naming names of how many of you brothers from down under I love, I'll get in trouble. So just big love to all of them. How's that?
Yeah, for sure. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Look, typically I invite my guests to share something to open up our dialogue together, and it has thus far revolved around the theme of honoring the sacred. So what I would love to ask you, and I know it's an overarching theme that encompasses so much, we could say encompasses everything really, and it could be taken in any direction, but what does it mean for you to honor the sacred or be in a place of remembering the sacred ways?
Okay. By the way, once you hit my on button, stop me if I go on too much, because I'm the Energizer Bunny. I go on autopilot. So feel free to jump in and question and stop me at any point.
Yeah, for sure.
But my second last book, The Center of the Universe is Right Between Your Eyes, but Home is Where the Heart Is, which is a long title, is very comprehensive of that. And in a nutshell, everything that we do is ultimately subjective. So we can take all of the stimulus that comes at us through our senses, no matter what it is, and it's how do we interpret it, which is what makes it real for us. So, you know, if I was an Aborigine, or I was a racist, or I was this or that or whatever, It's how I see the world. So in terms of the shamanic work and expanding consciousness, I've learned over the years the hard way to be open and flexible. And how I interpret the world explains my part in it and being sacred. So what I like to say is the center of the universe is right between your eyes, because that's where you make those decisions and things. But home is where the heart is, because if you continue this work, you go back to the heart. And I don't know, I'm sure you're familiar with ayahuasca. Yeah, I like that look on your face. So I've been working with it extensively for over 20 years now. Mm. And for me personally, what I discovered is that ayahuasca takes you from the head to the heart. And there's a concept in shamanism that, and it's in actually ancient Egypt and ancient cultures, deeply rooted ancient cultures, that the heart is the center of your being. It's the sun, and it actually has more receptors, of greater density of receptors than the mind. Mm. So in shamanism, the heart is the center of your being. And there's the temple of anthropocosmic man in Luxor, Egypt. It's a precise mathematical map of the human body, and also, they say, a precise mathematical map of the cosmos. So the heart is at the center, and the lungs and the kidneys, those are like all the different planets surrounding it. Now, in shamanism and ancient Egyptian thought, the heart, that is your sun, the center of your being, is connected to the sun in the middle of our solar system. That's connected to a bigger sun, to a bigger sun, to a bigger sun, all the way back to source. So when you start to realize that we really are all aspects of the one, and that the sun is the giver of life, and Mother Earth, Madre Tierra, Pachamama, holds us. Mm. And they work together, the complementary masculine and feminine, to bring us into existence. And when you really start to embrace that, you realize that we are all aspects of, for lack of better words, we are all aspects of God. We are all aspects of divinity. And everybody we come in contact with is a reflection of us. It's like you and I have, before we even spoke, and when you first approached me and all that, and you heard my stuff, you and I had a connection. Hmm. You just said a little while ago, there's all these things you're into, and I'm very interested, and we're very much kindred spirits, because this aspect of myself is reflected in you, and you're reflecting back to me. Hmm. I must say, you're a pretty good reflection, dude. You know? So when you realize that you are an aspect of divinity, and you really start to realize how everything is connected, we are all one, and it's all connected. What I just described to you is also, in many respects, a definition of a hologram. I don't know how much you know about holograms or not.
A little bit. Yeah, I have read a book. I've got a book behind me. I can't remember. The Holographic Universe. That's right. I read that a couple of years ago.
I've read it twice, and I probably bought 6 copies and given it away. Hmm. And this, what I'm talking about here, I wrote a book called The Infinity Zone, which explores a lot of the stuff I'm talking about. But the point is, when you realize that you are connected with everything, and I'm telling you, when you go into the jungle and you do an ayahuasca dieta, you become the jungle. And you are connected with everything. And when you realize that we are all, in fact, divine beings. So we become the sacred. You know, well, we remember that we are the sacred. Mm-hmm. That's why I liked it in that podcast with Mr. Gesso there. We had fun with that. We had some little adventures with it. But when I said everybody's a shaman, only most of us don't know it, because nobody's any better than anybody else. We're all equal. There are levels of awareness. But I can say to you, oh, gee, I'm a much better, more accomplished writer than you. Well, duh, I've only been writing for almost 40 years, right? So it's like if I left from San Diego to go to Boston and I got there before you, that means I left before you and got there before you. That doesn't make me any better. You know, I have more words under my belt, so I have more experience. So yeah, but it doesn't make me any better. We're ultimately equal, you know? So that whole aspect of the sacred and the experience of becoming one with all, which I've experienced in the jungle to a very large degree, really drives who I am, what I do, and what I really strive and struggle to manifest. So everybody I see in my life, I see as an aspect of divinity, and we're self-aware, multifaceted, multidimensional beings, whether we know it or not. At least in my universe. By the way, everything I say is in my universe, and everything I say I consider an offering, and people can take it or leave it. Mm-hmm. So this is how it is in my universe.
Yeah, look, it's an offering that is certainly well received on my end, and I'm still early days for me on this path. But what I certainly have noticed is that while there are many forgettings during the daily happenings of regular life, the remembrance that comes quicker and quicker. I'm not stuck in these periods of forgetting for as long as I have been in the past.
Absolutely. I want to say really quick, people such as yourself and other very close brothers of mine, friends of mine who are younger are getting it quicker. So all of the things I've gone through that I've expressed in all of my writings, you guys can read it. And you don't have to be as nuts as I am and have been and was, because I did it for you. And if you're aware enough, anybody is aware enough to catch that and get the lesson that I paid dearly for, then you can pick it up quickly and go to the next level and accelerate, because to me, it's all accelerating. And I got a lot of respect for you guys. I've talked to younger people who are way smarter than people I know twice and three times their age. Because you guys pick up quick.
Well, there's probably something to be said there about ingraining. Well, what I'm thinking about is Rupert Sheldrake's idea, his notion of morphic fields, morphic resonance. So the more that we experience, the more switched on, the quicker we become switched on. We're almost like patterning that into the morphic field or this collective consciousness, so that the future generations or the younger generations can tap into that a lot quicker. Like we see it with, what's an example here? Skateboarders or surfers or any kind of extreme athletes. They become younger and younger, and they're picking up on skill sets that are just insane at such a young age. They seem to be just tapping into this field.
Well, I wrote a lot about that actually in my Center of the Universe book I'm presently yakking about. By the way, I'm wearing the t-shirt of the book cover.
Nice one.
But that whole thing of energetic fields, and in my humble opinion, in my experience, shamanism is all about energy. And the path of shamanism is learning how to master energy. And everything is energy. Spirit is energy. There's an energy of different, when they say I've communed and I've learned from the plant spirits in the jungle, you're communing with different energies, and they're all unique with different gifts. Just like every animal has its own gift. It's a very unique energy. It's a very unique essence. So the way it all connects and all it interacts, and particularly in shamanism with the whole idea of shapeshifting and embracing animal consciousness, brings you more and more into that realm where it's all connected. And in the jungle, you see nature and reality in the world as a symphony. The bugs get eaten by the bigger animals, the lizards, they die, or they get eaten something else, they get eaten by someone else. They get all the way up the food chain to jaguars or whatever. They croak, they rot, the plants eat them. Everything has its place, and that's one of the big problems in the world right now, is that the whole, humanity has gone outside the boundaries and totally upset the balance. And so in my humble opinion, in my experience, nature and the cosmos always seek to restore the balance. And I think that's what we're really lacking. And that's why we're paying the price, as a race, as humanity. The bills come and due. We're overdrawn.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah. So well, look, I see it that way. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, while we're on this greater theme of shamanism, let's dive into some of the heart of it. As you said, you've explored it to a reasonably great depth, much more than the majority of the population, no doubt. And what I'm interested in getting your perspective on is, well, as a bit of a trampoline into some of the other topics that I'd love to touch on with you, is, well, first of all, for some context, we both know that there are many different branches of shamanism. In particular, let's just take Amazonian curanderismo, Amazonian shamanism, for example, that have at the heart of their practice the sacramental use of plants, in which a large part of that is inducing altered states of consciousness for a variety of purposes. And we find plant-based shamanism or shamanism that uses certain substances to alter consciousness all around the globe. But on the other hand, if we want to look at a slightly different lens, there are no doubt pockets of shamanistic traditions all around the globe that might not necessarily have a pharmacopoeia of plants at the pinnacle or perhaps at the heart of their shamanic techniques. So it's here we could call this, in the name of reductionist simplicity, plant-based shamanism and non-plant-based shamanism. And I get the sense that most people in our modern era are largely familiar with plant-based shamanism, altering consciousness through the use of ayahuasca, peyote, San Pedro cactus, mushrooms, iboga, whatever it is. So I would love to know what you have to say in regards to what we might consider different branches of shamanism based on your experience and research. And also, despite the cross-cultural pollination, what is your perspective on what the key pillars are when it comes to shamanic practice at a universal level?
Great question, brother. So let me tell you just a little story. I was asked to speak to a Rotary Club. It's a community club in a very conservative town in California called Solvang. And I was going to speak about shamanism. And so all these wives were all excited. There was very wealthy people, very conservative. And we get this guy about shamanism. And the guys all came, the husbands. Oh, what do you hear what this guy has to say, right? So I got up there and I said, first off, I'd like to thank you all for inviting me to come to talk to you about the world's oldest profession. And I stopped. And they all had this look on their face. And I said, look where your minds went. You should all be ashamed of yourself, because prostitution isn't the world's oldest profession. Shamanism is. And then I had them. And then I got off on my thing. Now, the very first time somebody looked up at the stars or nature and said, what does all this mean, was the roots of shamanism. And absolutely every religious belief in the world comes from shamanism. It's the oldest prehistoric system of belief. Now, the primary difference between shamanism and organized religion is that organized religion is based on the words of prophets. So I've really irritated some Christians. I will say to them, hey, listen, Jesus went into the desert and fasted for 40 days and 40 nights and talked to gods. I guarantee you, if you go into the desert and you fast for 40 days and 40 nights, you'll be talking to God too, right? Muhammad went into the cave. Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree. So these visionaries had their experiences, however they brought them about, through altering their consciousness. They had those revelations, those epiphanies, those gifts of divine knowledge, for lack of better words. And then somebody listened to what they had to say, and somebody wrote it down, and then somebody else translated it, and somebody else took that and translated it and wrote it down, and somebody else put their own spin on it, and then it's got filtered down and diluted and spread out, and then people started making their own agendas about it. Okay? Mm-hmm. Shamans say, to hell with all that. Don't listen to what anybody says. You go out into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights, and you have direct experience. So shamanism is based on direct experience, is my point of all this. Mm-hmm. And you can't, when you have true shamanic experiences and visionary experiences and revelations, you're using your entire mind. So you're getting into non-rational, emotional thought. So you can't necessarily express that so much in words. And one of my life struggles, and I'm told I'm getting good at it now, is trying to take a non-rational visionary experience and put it into words that people can relate to. And in doing that in itself is a shamanic act, because shamanism is a bridge. Mm-hmm. Shamanism are the first teachers, the first performing artists, the first doctors, the first psychologists, the first medicine men. They were the first of everything. So shamanism is about being a bridge and bridging that, whether soul retrieval or whatever you want to call it, that which is numinous and non-rational and a different way of knowing that you can only find by direct experience. It's all about that. So a minor side trip here, not really, but sort of.
Sure.
So we go and navigate the world by our left brain, which is logic. Mm-hmm. Logic is yes and no, bits and bytes, the whole internet, 1 and 0, sun, moon, male, female, everything is sort of duality. Okay. That's how our left brain works. Even communicating to you right now, I'm taking each word and I'm stringing them into a sentence one by one in serial manner. You're listening to each word, you're taking it, you're unpacking it, and you're applying your own knowledge and experience to what I'm saying to you, and we are communicating. Mm-hmm. Now, when you go to the right brain, it's not linear like that. It's conceptual, it's emotional, it's the feminine, it's intuition. It's why intuition is superior to logic, because you can have a experience, an epiphany of 50 different things and suddenly get a flash of insight. Poof, just like that. So when we go to sleep at night, if we're not smoking too much cannabis, our left brain goes to sleep and at some point takes a break and the right brain comes out to play. Mm-hmm. And we have very often bizarre, magical dream experiences. And we're in those experiences, we totally accept them. Oh yeah, I'm flying. Of course I'm flying. You don't even think about it. It's just like normal in that realm. So that's when the right brain gets to come out and play and say what it has to say, which is often confusing because it's not a linear thing. Now, what happens with ayahuasca is you drink ayahuasca and your left brain is on, and then your right brain is get turned on at the same time. And there's a dialogue. And it's why people often have trouble integrating. Because I love what you said a little while ago about the times in between becoming shorter and shorter. In many respects, I tell people with ayahuasca and psychedelic experiences overall, mushrooms, whatever, in many, many respects, it's the time in between the experiences are more important. Because when you're drinking ayahuasca and other things, but I'm using ayahuasca as an example, you get so overwhelmed with information, you can't process it. Integration is when the left brain gets to catch up with all the stuff that came out of the right brain. And the people that I have seen who have had the hardest time with ayahuasca and the most terrifying times are the highest level intellectuals that I have known. I had a renowned PhD, I won't mention his name, but he came to the jungle with us and he spent three ayahuasca sessions curled up in my lap in a fetal position because he's used to functioning in his reality with his mind, with his logical mind. And suddenly he was in a place that didn't work anymore, right? So people need to take that time to integrate between experiences because there's a whole lot that gets downloaded and your intellectual mind really needs time to catch up and make sense of it. And then the other part of it is that often in visionary experiences like with ayahuasca, you get an insight. An insight doesn't mean you've solved everything. An insight means you've glimpsed it and you've seen it. Then you have to put that into practice in your everyday life, which is where I've seen a lot of people, they've had one or two ayahuasca experiences and suddenly they're a guru. I've got everything figured out. No, they just got a glimpse and they need to keep doing the work to continue putting into practice in everyday life what they've learned in their experiences. The mind is an amazing thing. And as shamans, they're traveling to realms that a lot of people out and out deny or don't want to see, right? And of course, the worst of it that nobody wants to see is the shadow. And the journey into the shadow and the terror that must be embraced at some point is where the gold is. You pay the price. They say in the jungle that the ordeals that you go through with ayahuasca and in the dietas, the ordeals and the discomfort, physical, psychological, and all that you go through is the price you have to pay to prove that you're worthy of the knowledge of the gifts that the plants have to give you. Now, I've had girlfriends tell me I was a weird masochist and all that for that, but I say, who cares? Because the other little part of this is you're smiling because you know.
I know.
Yeah. So I know you know, and you know I know, and I know you know, and we all know, right? Everybody knows, sort of. But so the thing about the path of this, particularly with ayahuasca, but with all of it, is that you have to embrace the light in the dark. You can't, these airy fairy, oh, I just want to see the light and all that, right? You have to embrace the light and the dark because you have to acknowledge that they're both sides of the same coin. And it's the only way you can really find your way back to the center is by acknowledging them both. And if you continue on this path and you do this work, You can be in blissful heavenly realms in one moment, and you can be in the depths of hell in another, and you can have your objectivity, and be within that and watch it all, pass by and, front row seat to the circus, right? But you can go through that and remain objective. And the more you do this work, the more you cultivate that, what I like to call witness consciousness. You cultivate that and you become more non-attached, not detached or I don't care or, I hate life, but non-attached. So you see it for what it is and you realize that everything in this world is indeed transitory. You buy a new car, that's great, but it's not going to be new forever. And at some point it's going to get dinged and crash and rot and fall apart and get dissolved into rust or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. So everything is transitory. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of power in that when you start to really embrace it and acknowledge it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Makes sense?
Doubt. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely does. Yeah. So let's tie that back in. So we've touched on a few pillars here. What else have you got to say in regards to what some of these key pillars might be across all different shamanic traditions, whether we're talking about the plant-based or the non-plant-based, or we're talking about Amazonian, Andean, African, Siberian?
Yeah, so I've studied American Indian shamanism, but my specialty is South American Indian shamanism. Mm-hmm. I have a historical novel called Land Without Evil that was turned into an amazing stage show. It was also the top fiction pick for the Paraguayan embassy, and I spent a lot of time researching it. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things, so I've also written a lot of horror and some science fiction horror and stuff over the years for fun. Mm-hmm. And I was delving into shapeshifting. And I was actually delving into werewolf mythology, which is called lycanthropy, which brought me to shapeshifting. And then I realized that the strongest, most dense shapeshifting traditions are in the Amazon, where there are numerous visionary plants. And I thought, wow, psychedelics and tripping and shamanism and that, I want some of that, right? So I started delving into that and I become an authority on that through I took an honors course in anthropology. It was called A Forest of Symbols, Orientation and Meaning to South American Indian Religions. And I really delved into that. And then I started to see all the parallels that all go back to the roots. And one of the things that fascinated me in this anthropology course was the fact that in just about every culture, there is a myth of the flood. Mm. And I mean, even in these just remote tribes that hardly anybody's ever heard of, they have a myth of the flood. And I thought, wow, Noah's Ark is like in the middle of the jungle, like these tribes who don't have had, contact with Westerners or whatever. And that fascinated me. And when you begin to embrace shamanic thought and you go beyond the mere rational, you start hitting archetypes. And archetypes are massively dense symbols of knowledge, which is one of the primary communications that we get from the right brain. It's why they're often so dense and overwhelming, because they're major, densely packed symbols. And when you start to embrace these archetypes and you start to learn about them, they're so profound. And so I mentioned my book, The Infinity Zone, and I've now also become a bit of an authority on sacred geometry. And I always like to say that I learned everything I need to know about sacred geometry from ayahuasca. So I learned it in my visionary experiences. Then I went and read the books. But I also came to the realization that geometry is actually a universal language. You can sit there and I can speak English or Zimbabwean or Mongolian or Chinese or whatever. And some people may understand what I'm saying, some won't. But no matter who we are in terms of humanity, which is all we really have to go on, so to speak, right? Anybody can look at a symbol and get the density of the meaning. They can get proportion. One thing's bigger than another. they can look at all the plants and see sacred geometry in the petals of a flower, or the Fibonacci spirals, or the phyllotaxis of a plant, and how the leaves display, and the conch shell. All of those things, if you look everywhere in nature, including the human body, specifically the human body, there is that beauty of perfection. And it doesn't matter what language you speak, you can see that and you can comprehend it. That, in my humble opinion, is universal language. And once you realize that we are manifestations of that, it ties back to where we kind of started this conversation, where we are, in fact, divine beings. Do you know about all the proportions of the body and things like that, and the golden mean and phi and phi and all that?
I have come across it. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to recite it off the top of my head, but I am aware of it.
I'll tell you a very, very quick for listeners of the podcast. Phi is 1.618. It's the golden section, the golden cut. It's the basis of where the Fibonacci spiral starts. This segment of your finger in relation to this one is the golden mean. The next segment is the golden mean, the hand to the arm, all the way up to the body. Your belly button is at the golden mean. It's at that 1.618. You can go into the whole dimensions of the face, the way the eyes are, the lips, all that. It all follows that. And it is a perfection that is everywhere. And when you start to become more aware and your eyes get more and more open to the divinity of the sacred that we in fact exist in, it's like, okay, I bought a Prius some years ago, right? Suddenly I started seeing Priuses everywhere, right? Because I'm driving one, right?
Yep.
So it's like that when you get that realization and that revelation, and you start to really see it everywhere. And when I walk in nature, I'm loving it. I'm looking and I see the perfect expression of that in the flowers and in the animals and things like that. And I'm just blown away. I mean, how can you argue with that? And again, it's universal language. It's a visual and stimulating. And of course, if you see it in ayahuasca vision, then you get all the cool colors and the transformations and the permutations. And to me, it's a multifaceted prism that expands infinitely in both directions. And it's how I see us as people. We're all facets of that wonderfully expanding, dynamic gem that we are all part of. Can't deny it. It's right there in front of our eyes.
Can't deny it. No, not at all.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
go on, mate.
No, you go, sir. I'm dabbling here.
No, it's good. It's good. I like what you're having to say. What I wanted to ask you about was actually, we'll go down the path of the evolution of shamanic traditions. And again, I'll provide a little bit of context into what I'm thinking here. And this is something that I have been exploring as I have been writing this book that I am writing to lay some foundational understanding. And that is that there has been somewhat of an archaic revival of shamanism. And what I mean by that is that there are many weekend workshops and classes and teachings that are popping up all around the globe, some of which I personally attended in the past, some of which I have seen advertised, and they often touch on the basics of shamanic cosmology, the three worlds, the purposes of a shamanic journey, maybe a few techniques or exercises here and there, maybe some talk about soul retrieval or power animals or whatever it is. And then it's not uncommon to go on a drum journey into the lower world to retrieve a power animal. And look, this is a very Michael Hana, Sandra Ingerman style of teaching and approaching shamanism, and I certainly don't want to knock that or place any judgment on these teachings. Yeah, they've been beneficial for me in some regards. They're obviously beneficial for others, but one can certainly argue that it is missing some core components of perhaps why shamanism even arose to begin with. But I'd love to hear your take on this, and of course, intertwined within this context, it'd be great to hear your views on the evolution of shamanic traditions up into what we are experiencing as perhaps what we could label as the new age perception of shamanism.
Yeah, there is a great danger, in my humble opinion, of people who have glimpsed some things and are suddenly gurus. And the true shamanic path is called the power path. And at every point, so the more you learn and the more you expand, the greater the temptations and the greater the energies that can send you off and lose integrity. And I see a lot of these people who set themselves up as gurus. I've seen a lot of them, particularly people who are working with Bufo various 5-MeO. You know, I worked with it for 10 years extensively. I took hundreds of people. I finally got to the point. There's an old saying among old psychedelic people: you've gotten the message. You can hang up the phone now. And I consider myself to be in a constant state of integration. If I never did another drop or anything at all, I'm fine. I'm constantly tripping. When I go now, I go with people, right? I went out to the desert 2 weeks ago with a guy and his wife who really wanted me to go and guide them on a journey. So yeah, well, I might as well take some while I'm out here and be there with them. And for years and years and years, when I would take people on their first LSD trips, I would make sure I took twice as much as they did. And then if they would start to freak out, I'd just look them in the eye and I'd go, hey, I took twice as much as you and I'm okay. Oh, you know, it really kind of settled them out. And I am what's considered a hardhead. You know, I was laughing with a friend yesterday because every time I took somebody on their first mushroom journeys back in the day, I would give them 1/4 of an ounce. That was normal for me. Point is, there's tons of sharks in the waters. There was a woman I was in the jungle with almost 20 years ago, and we were doing 5 ceremonies during the 10-day dieta. She did 3 of them and stopped. And then she wrote a book about ayahuasca that people were raving over. And that was the extent of her experience. That makes me nuts. So one of the reasons I'm so outspoken and continue to be more so all the time is I want everybody to have their eyes wide open. Because the temptation and the lack of integrity, how many gurus, you know, yeah, this is so-and-so guru guy. Well, he's got 20 concubines, right? It's a lack of integrity, and it's a great danger. And some of the things that people experience are so powerful and profound that they get caught and they turn it to their advantage. The more you rise up, I don't even like to use that word, rise up. Let's just say the more you expand your consciousness, the greater the responsibility that comes with it. And if you screw up, the price you're going to pay is going to be bigger all the time. So it's a very, very, very powerful responsibility. When I lead ceremonies with a large group, there's typically 23 people. I'm personally responsible for everyone in that room. I don't, and I see some beautiful women. I'm like, oh man, right? But that's crossing the line. Mm-hmm. Just like with the writing. So I've been teaching the writing for like 32 years now. And when people come to me and they're in my writing workshop, they're vulnerable. And they have to be able to be safe with me. Just like anybody I've taken a health space for, if I've taken them on a 5-MeO journey or an LSD journey or, mushroom, whatever it is, I'm personally very, very responsible for them. Their whole psyche, their whole well-being, their whole existence is in my hands. And they've come to me with that trust. And that can't be violated. And yet, I see these gurus and things going around, and even when they call themselves that, it makes me nuts. So, I went through this whole thing where people just kept calling me a shaman. And then I would protest. One guy, poor guy, was on his podcast and I went off on him. Don't call me that. He's like, oh, man, I'm sorry. And then I realized if I'm making too much of a stink about it, I'm drawing too much attention to it. That was actually the genesis for James Jesso's podcast. That's my new response now. Everybody's a shaman, only most of us don't know it because we all have that potential. If you're a hardhead like me and you need massive doses of psychedelics to open your eyes, that's my path. But there are people who don't. Are you familiar with the science fiction writer Ray Bradbury?
The name rings a bell, but not overly familiar.
He wrote Fahrenheit 451, Something Wicked This Way Comes the Illustrated Man. Legendary science fiction writer, started in the 50s. He was one of my mentors. I was blessed to spend time. He never gave out blurbs for books, and he gave a blurb for my book, and I was very blessed to spend a lot of time with him. And that guy doesn't need a drop of anything. He's like a 3-year-old tripping hard on acid all the time. And it's wonderful to be in his presence, the energy of it, right? Some people don't need it. Some women I know have such a highly developed sense of intuition. They don't need anything. Everybody's different.
Yeah, sure. When the channels are open, the channels are open.
Exactly. And some people are genetically predisposed or neurochemically, neurologically predisposed to those things, and they don't need help. Me, I'm a hardhead. So, part of it goes back to the whole idea of shamanism and interpretations and all the different paths. I said earlier, shamans say, go have the direct experience yourself, right? Well, then people do that. And then, as I said, somebody else writes about it, and somebody else writes about that and translates it and blah, blah. And by the time it gets down the line, it's so diluted and polluted, and people have their own agendas. I had a wonderful experience. So I worked with a personal coach for 6 or 7 years, very high level, very expensive. And everybody who worked with her, she said to them, if they were doing ayahuasca, she said, stop it, except me. She told me to keep doing it. And it took me 4 or 5 years to come to terms with what I was experiencing with ayahuasca and what I learned with her. One of the great things she told me, among others, is that we all have one primary wound. And shamans are called the wounded healers, by the way, among other things. Our one primary wound is that we don't feel worthy of being loved. So I discovered through some hard lessons, I was doing things that I thought because I was being loving to people, but I had an agenda. And it wasn't as pure as I thought. I was doing it because I didn't feel like I was being worthy of being loved. So therefore, my love wasn't unconditional. And I'm here to tell you, brother, boy, did I pay for that. But I learned it. And it goes all the way back to the womb and the birth process. So many people who think they are loving have an agenda. And I would say, no disrespect to anybody, but I think, gosh, I don't know, maybe 85, 90% of people who have set themselves up as gurus have an agenda. So I always like to qualify. People can call me a writing guru all day. I'm fine with that. I'm a writing guru. I'm a mentor. I'm fine with that. But I'm not anybody's guru, or as the expression goes, gee, you are you, right?
Gee, you are you.
Yeah, because what is it? I don't really teach anybody anything. What I can do is I can point them in the direction so they can go back and find themselves, and they can remember, right? Dismember is to take apart. Remember is to bring it all back together again. So the path is to the heart, and the heart is the compass, and the heart is where all the wisdom comes from. And anything I have to say that makes any sense, that might have any sense of intelligence, it ain't me, brother. I'm opening my mouth, and it's coming out, and I'll be the first to admit my ego's fine. But my best stuff when I'm writing, writing is my favorite altered state. I'm also a percussionist, and I play handpan. In fact, if you can see my handpan behind me here or not.
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
Yeah. When I'm doing that, and I'm playing in ceremony, and we do healing music, and I got another brother who plays a badass didge, and he plays pan, pipes, and flute, and I sing Ikaros, and I play handpan. Man, when I'm at my best, I don't even hardly know anybody's there. It's just coming, and it's flying, and there's like no thought behind it. It's like pure inspiration. That, to me, is where it's at, and it's very challenging to do, and it's not something, it's not something that's easy to handle. The power of that is not easy to handle. It takes tremendous responsibility. I don't know how much I want to block with that one, but I hope I answered what you asked.
Yeah. So what I'm getting the sense of from your perspective, that there is a lot of a lack of integrity. There is a lot of irresponsibility, when it comes to the evolution of shamanism when we get up to the new age. And this ties into actually a question that I wanted to ask you. And as a side note, that's another thing that we have in common as well. It's percussion. I played drums in touring bands around Australia for about, 13 or 14 years. This is in a distant past life now.
Oh,
it seems like a different kind of lifestyle. But yeah, that was a large part of my life for many years.
Amen, brother. I play the traps. I got a Nishiko, and now the handpan's opening up new dimensions for me. And my old man was a big band jazz drummer in the Navy back in World War II. That's so cool. I've been playing for years and years. I played in rock bands and country rock bands and this and that. In fact, I'm going with the handpan on this coming Thursday, and I'm going to record with a rock band on a vinyl album.
You're a multi-talented, multi-dimensional man.
Yeah, I'm a legend in my own mind. I'll go that far.
For sure. Look, what I wanted to get to, we'll circle back around, and you've mentioned it a couple of times now, your book. The center of the universe is right between your eyes, but home is where the heart is. You talk about the evolution of language, and this ties into what we were just speaking about as well, the evolution of shamanistic tradition up into the new age. It's a large part of this has been the evolution of language and moving from oral storytelling or oral traditions into literacy, into the written word. And we often see progress linked to progress linked to these cognitive aspects of the brain as fantastic. Like, we're so clever, we've figured out how to write things down and communicate in this manner. And of course, it's paved the path, or at least probably more accurately, it's tied into many technological advancements, and the collective mindset for these technological advancements and technological progression has been, look, we're geniuses, look at all we've done. But you point out, and I perceive things in a similar way from what I understand, and it's that with the introduction of literacy, it actually was a catalyst for humanity in, let's say, a less harmonious direction when it comes to our connection with nature. So I'd love if you can talk a little bit about that.
One of my favorite subjects. So, in terms of the evolution of language, briefly going back in history, there were, vocal utterances, right? Step on my foot, I'm going to go, ow, right? And then they started with the beginning of the alphabet, which followed symbolisms for I think the letter A was for ox. If you take A and you turn it upside down, you got the horns in the ox's head, and they all had their phonetic equivalents. Now, and I'm jumping, I'm leapfrogging centuries here, but moving forward, well, let me stop the Egyptians for a minute, because the Greeks ripped off the Egyptians for a lot of stuff anyway. But there's a school of thought that they would say, well, the Egyptians were so advanced, why was there hieroglyphics and not language? There is a school of thought that says that the Egyptians had telepathy because they communicated with the heart. I'm talking ancient, way back. That they communicated with the heart, and the fact that they communicated with the heart, they had an advanced sense of telepathy, so there was a lot more truth. And they didn't need to communicate as much because of that. So whether you believe it or not, or anybody does, I love the whole idea and the whole concept of that. So, and then, then there was the Aleph Beth, which is the beginning. I think it was Assyrian. It's in my book. I don't remember the details, but that evolution of language, then when you get up to ancient Greece. Now, ancient Greece and the stories were oral traditions, and they were performed. And they took their stories and their myths, like the Iliad and the Odyssey, and then as generations changed and their culture started to change, they would adapt the stories to the culture. So it was living. One of the things that drove me to write that novel, Land Without Evil, is about the Guarani in Paraguay, Indians. And I got some very expensive, arcane books written by anthropologists that preserved aspects of their culture and their religious hierarchy. And I wrote the book because I wanted to try to preserve that in some way, because it was getting lost. Much of the knowledge of the jungle that has been passed on through oral tradition has been lost and is being lost. There's an expression, might have been Plotkin or Wade Davis or somebody was saying that every time a medicine man dies, it's like a whole encyclopedia of knowledge has been lost. So writing it and recording it and conveying that has been important to me. But in terms of the ancient Greeks, as an example, written language was developed for a long time with them before it got widely accepted, because the art of performing the cultural mythologies was performance art. And those cultural mythologies that were performed and evolved were chock full of archetypes. Among them, the hero's journey, which I can go on a whole riff of that, but I'll put that aside for the moment. But those evolving performance art archetypes. Now, once the written language became more accepted, and for lack of better words, more evolved, it took us one step removed from the world and the culture. It no longer became dynamic and living. It became static. You can appreciate this. Aborigines go on their walkabouts, right? And how do they know where every place is? It's a song. And they go through the place, I'm making this up. I'm a crazy, American guy here, right? But this is the place of the babbling brook where Kwantu found the kangaroo, right? And then he takes 20 more steps, right? And this is the place where such and such happened, right? And this is where the wallaby did that, right? It's all connected to the land with the song and the story that is told in the song. It's how they navigate. And correct me if I'm out of school. You're an Aussie, dude. I'm a gringo or whatever, right? But, that is the connection to the land. And the American Indians have similar traditions like that, where it's their connection to the land. So once it gets written down on paper, that connection is broken. And it's, for lack of better words, it's frozen in time, right? So you take that dynamic living body of knowledge connected to the land, and when you write it down, you've separated it and you've made it static. It's frozen. Then you have the development of the Gutenberg press, right? Suddenly they're printing out, thousands of copies of this static thing that's no longer living and dynamic and is out of touch with the natural world, and it's getting spread to everybody. And of course, that's how that knowledge spread. Now you take that from printing presses in the history of the written word, printing, blah, blah, blah. Now jump ahead centuries to the internet and electronic publishing and stuff spread everywhere, right? Now we're even more removed from nature, right? It's a cliche, but you walk around down the street and everybody's looking at their phones, right? There could be a volcanic eruption they don't know, and people are walking in front of cars and all this other stuff because they're focused on the phone, which is connected to the internet, right? And then, of course, who knows what the hell the truth is anymore, right? Fake news and all that crap, right? Who knows? You don't. So what do? You read all the stuff, you go, okay, well, something happened here. And then in my humble opinion, if you compare it with your heart, that's your compass. And that can keep you focused on the path you should be taking. Because if you're true to your heart and it's really trying to manifest unconditional love, then you're not going to get caught up in the ego and the personality and all the agendas and all that crap. If you stay true to your heart, and it's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason, you stay true to it, you got a compass in this insane world. So now, through the evolution of written word, printing presses, the internet, where somebody can write a paper in Russia and you can be reading it 30 seconds later, it's all diffused and it's all so far removed from the natural world, which gets me back to the whole idea of living in the sacred. And the fact, one of the things I love about the jungle is there's no radio, there's no technology, there's no electronic energy. It's the plants and it's the animals, and you are enmeshed in that morphogenetic field. And I always like to say I've toured the jungle from the inside out and backwards, because when I drink ayahuasca, I'm stuck in the middle, with the plant bats and all the other plants and the dieta over a period of time. You really become the jungle. And you immerse in that wonderful, natural energy. You're not sitting there looking at your phone, oh, gee, somebody didn't like me on Facebook, or, oh, Black Lives Matter and all lives matter and all that nuttiness, right? All those agendas, all those diversified, splintered, scattered, further and further and further from the truth, which goes all the way back, like we started this conversation, goes all the way back to the beginnings of shamanism, where those first wonderfully, for lack of better words, pure thoughts originated. So I can look at this. I can look at the Catholic Church. I can look at the Buddhists. I can look at the Muslims and all those people, and I can see tons of shamanic elements within them. But there's also the agendas of the people, you know, that go forth and prosper, right? And I'm not picking on anybody in particular. I like to pick on everybody all the time, right? But the Mormons, right? The Mormons go have 8 wives and 500 kids because we want to take over the earth. I think the Muslims do something like that, and a lot of them do that. Go and populate with all your people so that can all be us, because we have the whole divinity thing happening, right? But it's not about that. It's about being one with nature and realizing. It's one of the reasons American Indians, they look at all the plants and animals as brothers and sisters. You know, if you pay attention to American Indians as an example, we're world hopping here, right? We've gone from the outback up here to, you know, Montana or whatever, right? Or Sioux country, right?
Uh-huh.
They don't say the bear. They say bear, because they see bear spirit as one. And when they kill an animal to eat it, same thing in South America. They're killing it and eating it with respect for their brother, and with the knowledge that one day they're going to be food for that brother. So they see all of those things as equal. They're all different energies. They're all different personalities. They're all different spirits, and they are to be respected and honored, because ultimately none of them are really any better than the other ones. They're all unique in their own way.
Yeah, this is an idea or a notion that I have been musing on and exploring in this book that I'm writing, the topic of language. And it's so interesting to hear you say that the word "the" is not used as a word before the being that we are speaking about. And of course, that's a conversation there as well, speaking about nature all the time rather than speaking to nature. But what I'm exploring is this word, this 2-letter word, such a humble word, and it makes its way into our conversation and into our language on a regular basis. And the word is it, I-T, it. It's a word that has been used for who knows how long to objectify things, to not see things as beings. And it's almost like this 2-letter word has made its way into our language as part of the, almost kind of like the Cartesian split between self and other, or rather the humanness and otherness. Whenever it's like if you were holding a pot plant and I'd be like, hey, give it to me, you know? Or you're looking up at the tree at a possum and you're like, oh, can you see it up there? It's always languaging these beings as it. And I think a lot of how we use language in our modern era it's intertwined with this disconnect between self and nature. And it's really interesting to reflect back on literacy as well, and how when we are reading so many books and how we're so attracted to our computer screens or the mobile phone screens, we're always reading or watching things. It has removed us even further from this direct experiential knowing that is at the core of shamanism and is at the core of nature-informed cultures all around the globe. So I feel a question coming on here. How do these reflections on language link up with this notion that you speak on when it comes to shamanic approaches to story and the roots of storytelling? It's all intertwined with this notion of oral tradition, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you just gave me an epiphany. So if is there any credit to this, you get credit. When you were talking about it, and when you said it, I immediately thought of objectification. And then I thought it, I-T, I and thou. Because it's that separation, right? And there's the whole idea of, I'm familiar with a priori knowledge or not, but a priori knowledge is what you know in your head, and then you see something in the external world, and there's a connection. It's how you relate to it. So let me delve into a shamanic approach to story structure. By the way, my workshop in my book is called Fantastic Fiction with a PH. So it's fantastic fiction, a shamanic approach to story structure. And it's what I call my workshop and all that. So let me get into the roots of that for a moment or two, or however long. So one of the basis of shamanism, among others, one of the primary basis is the journey to the underworld. One of the keys of shamanism is when the shaman or the person goes into the underworld and they get dismembered or decapitated, or in South American shamanism and ayahuasca, they get swallowed by the jaguar. They get destroyed. And they come back as a new being, as a man or a woman of power. And what they learn and experience in those lower underworld realms, they bring back as a gift for everybody else. That is the whole basis for the hero's journey, which is the primary archetype of storytelling in humanity. The most successful movies and books follow the hero's journey exactly. Star Wars follows the hero's journey exactly. Harry Potter follows the hero's journey exactly. Lord of the Rings follows the hero's journey exactly. And it's all based on that archetype of the shamanism going into the underworld. And if you examine that, you realize that the underworld is the human shadow. And it's a wonderful metaphor because you have to go down and confront your shadow and you get dismembered because everything you thought you knew gets destroyed. And you come back changed as a man or a woman of power. So I'm skipping over aspects of the hero's journey, but in a nutshell, in the hero's journey, the hero starts off with life normal and everything's wonderful and something upsets the balance. And it's the hero, they're not really a hero at this point. They're off on this journey to reset the balance. And they go back and they become the protagonist. And at some point, the protagonist comes up against the antagonist. Metaphorically speaking, the antagonist is actually the protagonist's shadow. And that whole deep archetype that's so deeply embedded in our culture is about facing the shadow. And it's a universal thing. So all of the things that the hero is not, the dark side of the force, right? Look, I'm your father, right? It's the shadow. So it's a wonderful metaphor, and it all comes from the shaman's journey to the underworld. That's the basis of it, which goes back to the beginning of all of it. That, like I was saying earlier, shamanism and the roots of it all go back to the very beginnings, and all religions and everything we know and all those spiritual thoughts all come from that, and that is the basis of the hero's journey. So when you realize that, and you realize that the hero's journey is all about transformation. And shamanism is all about transformation. And if you have the protagonist going forward, they embody the thesis. You know, if you're doing a doctoral thesis, then you're proving a point or attempting to prove a point through your arguments. That is the thesis. That's the guiding thought, energetic that is going forward. Thesis. Well, what happens to the thesis? It comes up against the antithesis, the antithesis, right? So the thesis confronts the antithesis or antithesis, and in that moment, which I call the story moment, is synthesis. What is synthesis? Synthesis is transformation. And the hero's journey is all about transformation, and the shaman's journey to the underworld and the quote unquote becoming a shaman is getting transformed. It's about transformation. And spiritual growth and spirituality is all about transformation. And when you go through transformation, what happens is you have polarities. You have, I love the word paradox, because you have two mutually exclusive energies, a positive and a negative, right? And if you continue to do the work, two things that are mutually exclusive that you don't think can exist together, if you can get to that point where you get to the middle, that is the definition of transcendence. because you rise above the polarity. You have a higher perspective because you have gone beyond duality. And then there's a whole new level of world that opens up. This is one of my favorite examples, strictly getting back to geometry for a moment. Strictly geometry and strictly dimensionality. A point has no dimension. For me, that is where spirit meets matter. By strictest, every definition you can find, a point has no dimension. Now, the first thing you do is take that point and you move it. Then you have a line. First dimension. If you exist within the first dimension, all you see is points. If you take that line and you move it to next, you have a plane, which is two-dimensional. If you exist within a plane, all you see is lines. If you take that plane and you move into a three-dimensional cube of length and height and width, and you exist within 3 dimensions, you're only going to see planes. So what that means is we are 4-dimensional beings, because you have to be in a higher dimension in order to perceive the dimensions below it. By the way, I think I stole this from Rudolf Steiner. I'm not this smart. I think you mentioned Steiner earlier. But anyway, so in my humble opinion, as we're evolving and going forward, and we're starting to really embrace what I like to think of as multidimensional concepts, in my humble opinion, we're 4-dimensional beings getting ready to embrace the 5th dimension, which transcends time and space. I can tell you in ayahuasca experiences, time is almost meaningless. I've experienced bilocation, being in 2 different places. I've experienced sort of multidimensionality, things that I can't even really put into words, right? And then if you think about the Hopi talk about the fifth age, the new age, the 5th world, there's all these different cultures have this whole 5th. I think that's where we're headed. And I think that's going to transcend time and space. And I like to think that all the different parts of my life at different times, all the things I've gone through, right now as I'm talking to you, they only exist in my mind. They don't exist anymore. My mom left the planet 15 years ago. She doesn't exist here anymore. Who knows where she is out there? I'm going to track her down if I can. But all the things, all whatever I've gone through, nothing truly matters except right now, here and now, the moment, right? So this whole concept of being in, and I get into this in major depth in my writings, but this whole idea that you have to be in a dimension above in order to perceive the dimension below. And those in dimensions below, and there's no judgment here, those in the dimensions below can't conceive of a dimension that's higher until they transcend it. The only way you can transcend it is by resolving paradoxes and facing the darkness and your deeper fears. One of the things I love about ayahuasca is it takes your deepest fears and puts it in your face. You know, there's no running, man. You know, you can water them out and I'll go, why did I drink this shit? And why am I puking and, all over myself and crapping in my pants, right? Ain't no escape, man. You brought it. And if you embrace it and you learn to resolve those paradoxes, in my humble opinion, you achieve transcendence of that situation. So, by the way, as you write your book, and when you write your book, you're more than welcome to steal anything I got that I've written that you can use. Give me credit, but it's there for the taking.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Absolutely.
This ties into another one of your works. Actually, it was your latest work, if my understanding is correct, Death, a love story. Yeah. Look, it's no surprise that Western culture is largely death phobic, despite paradoxically being a death culture. And this is what one of my buddies calls it, a death culture, in the context of it's not set up in a way that is conducive to practices and pathways that lead to the cultivation of heart consciousness, of transcendence, of soul essence, deeper connection and harmony with nature. And if it's not that, well, then what the hell is it? Well, arguably, it's a death culture. But look, that aside, people are afraid of confronting death and dying. It's taboo. It's uncomfortable for a lot of people to really look at death in the eyes and have a real heart-to-heart conversation with it. So this ties into death being such an important part if we are to come to this place of transcendence, because it's, from what I understand, I haven't read your book, but just the title, Death, a Love Story. It's this interwoven notion of death and love together. So I guess what I'm interested in hearing about is your reflections and your musings on that, and how we tie death in with everything that we're talking about.
Thank you for the plug, bro. So I've been writing all these years, and I'm always stretching the limits of what you can do. And I thought one of the things I wanted to do was really play with first-person narrative. Like a lot of young adult novels it's the voice that carries it. So I wanted to capture the voice of death. And I wanted to do it in a way that one of the things you learn, and I know you know this, one of the things you learn when you take ayahuasca is that there's a whole lot more shit that's way more powerful than you are. I mean, in the face of death, on all of that, we're really helpless. Death owns us. So I struggled, and I've gotten some really, really wonderful reviews, a couple of them, about the book, because I struggled to make death not only sexless. Some people think it's male, but I sweat blood to make it, omniscient, non-polarity, male or female voice, and yet omniscient. And when I realized how much we don't have control over, I thought, wow. And even though it's death, a love story, it's really sort of about the universe and the cosmos and existence as we know it. Because we can't control. If you and I suddenly got blown up by a nuclear bomb, we can't control that. If I walk in the middle of the street and somebody shoots me or runs me over with a car, I can't control that. So it starts out, hi, I'm your death, and I'm here for you. No, don't run, not like that. Not in that way, at least not now. At least I don't think so. But I want you to know that I have given you your gift of existence. And I want you to know that I'm here for you. And instead of loving me, I want you to know that I love you unconditionally. My love for you is all-consuming. And I really can't wait for you to come home. And all those things you have in your life and all those things that you think are important are all mine. I'm just letting you use them. Have fun. But I'm going to come to you whenever I feel like it, and there's nothing you can do about it. But I love you. Don't be afraid of me. I'm here for you, and I love you unconditionally, and I'm the portal, I am the face of the great mystery that you're a part of. So I love you. Don't be afraid of me. Don't make me the Grim Reaper. If you saw the cover or not. I had so much fun with it, and I edited it, and I worked hard. And so it has the history of death, and I'm going to spoil the ending just a little bit, because I go through all this stuff about death and this and that, and death traditions, and germ warfare, and plagues, and all that stuff, right? And war, and death, and destruction. And then at the end, death says, so now I've told you everything there is really at this point to know about me, except that's all that you think about me. You still don't know anything about me. And I'm waiting for you for that special day when you come home with open arms and love. And that's paraphrased in a nutshell.
Well, it ties back around into the very, very start of our conversation, that direct experiential knowing that is inherent, the core of shamanism.
Yes, sir. I mean, I've been through the death experience a number of times with ayahuasca and also with 5-MeO and smoking the toad and all those things I've tried. And I've also been near death a couple of times for different experiences. One time I got a virus from the jungle that almost killed me. So I'm very familiar with death. And I wake up in the morning, okay, I'm 64. And I wake up in the morning and I go, Jesus, where did it all go? It's just gone in a blink of an eye. And as you said, I'm actually feel very comfortable that you said that. It's going faster for you also. I think we're all getting accelerated. And for me, Now it seems like, God, where did the last 20, 40, where did it all go? I don't even know where it all went. It went by so quick. So I'm very aware that it's coming. And I have to admit, part of me is looking forward to leaving, but I'm not in any hurry. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna cultivate. I'm not gonna bring it on. But when it comes, and I think this ties back in with what I was talking about non-attachment. I don't care about things anymore. I got a new computer. I love it. It's a great tool. If I could get me a new Tesla, I'd have fun driving it. But that's not my driving force at all. I could care less. I know some very wealthy people. Some of them are the most unhappiest people I know. Because you get to a point where you have all these things that you think you own, and they end up owning you. Right? So, I'd like to get another house. I've been through houses. I've been homeless, this, that, and the other thing. I'd love to get a house and have a nest, a place to call home where I can work out of and do my work. But that's not like my be-all and end-all. That's just something, because I fully realize how temporary all this is. And every moment, and every precious moment that I've had is gone. Like, hey, gone. Right? That finger snaps doesn't exist anymore. Right? You and I can remember it. And maybe we'll go to sleep tonight and go, remember that crazy guy snapped his fingers? Wow, whatever, right? But it really is the moment. It's all that really matters. And in my humble opinion, if you maintain integrity and you follow your heart, you can't go wrong. And that to me is the basis and the essence of the shamanic path, is following your heart. It's your only real compass. You can listen to everything, what all these people say, this to that, and fake news and la, 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 and the internet and la, la, la. But you can only compare it to what you feel inside of yourself, in your heart, where to me is the true beacon that goes beyond, mere rationality and linear thought. That's the way home. That's why the center of the universe is right between your eyes, but home is where the heart is. That's where it's at for me, in my universe.
Well, look, since we have both touched on a number of your books, I'd love to hear more about your writing process, or more generally, your creative process. So firstly, what makes for a good writing day for you?
Well, the best writing days are about 7 pages first draft. But I'm very deeply into the editing process, because I've been trained by some of the best people ever that anybody could ever be blessed. Among them, Ray Bradbury. Most of my mentors now have left the planet or are leaving the planet. Last week, I had a Zoom birthday party with my dear friend who introduced me to Bradbury. It was his 97th birthday. So just like with the writing and with the ayahuasca, I'm carrying the torch and I'm in the driver's seat. And I have to accept my elderhood, or they call me a psychedelic elder, right? And then I can be a writing guru and a writing mentor. I'm fine with all that. So over the years, I've learned the art of feeding my subconscious and trusting it. So one of the things, this last wonderful review I got for Death, the lady was tripping out like, God, this guy, this stuff he knows and the research, everybody needs to read this book. It's all this brilliant stuff and la, la, la. And I'm like, I wrote that? Right? So when I'm doing something, and let me back up even, so Land Without Evil was published 20 years ago. When I did that and got all the accolades and wonderful reviews, I researched it for 2.5 years. And I dump the research onto the page and I feed my mind. I just put it in there and I forget about it. And then, as it stays in there for long enough, and this is just after all these years now, I get a real sense of it. When it's ready, it pops out. It starts coming through. It's magic. You have to learn to work with your subconscious. You have to learn to trust it and realize it's okay not to know. They joke, well, you're a writer. You're just walking around in circles. Trust me, I'm writing. Even if it's not conscious, and so I'll write things and people will say to me, wow, the way you connected to that thing, and that was just really brilliant genius. And I'm like, thank you. And in my back of my head, I'm like, I did that? I mean, I don't even know I did it.
I know that feeling.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, it's that sense that what the subconscious does and how it puts things together, and learning to trust that process. So when I'm doing a book, I typically end up with about a 10-page outline. It's stream of consciousness. It's not subparagraph B, section 7, 9A, Q, blah, blah. It's snippets of dialogue, part of a scene, and I just put it all in there. And I've learned over all these years to let it gestate and develop on its own, just like you put a seed into the ground, right? The cliche, you pop an acorn into the ground, it's just an acorn, but the whole oak tree's inside that acorn. Learning that process. And then when the time comes and I tap into it, boom, out it comes. And I've even been stuck on particular scenes, and I'll just blow it off and forget about it for a week. And then, bang, it will come out. I learned years back, I've also worked in technology all of my life to feed myself. And I would be stuck with major problems, all this pressure. And I have no idea what it is. Stuck. But one time I was working on these big computer typesetters, and I had all these managers, they were getting fined $1,000 an hour, and they were all there, and I said, go away and leave me alone. And I had a paper take program that I loaded into the computer, and all it did was flash the lights. And I was stuck. I couldn't figure it out. And I said, okay, I'm running a diagnostic. I'll be back. I'm going to take a walk. And invariably, I would walk away and forget about it, and I'd come back 15 minutes later, and bang, I get it. So it's learning to trust the subconscious, learning how to feed it, and learning how to trust how it's going to come out. And then what's happening to me more and more now is I read stuff I wrote 6-8 months ago, a year ago, and I'm like, I wrote that? Wow. Gee, that's pretty good. Not bad. And I don't even hardly remember I wrote it, which is when I was first doing writing workshops way back, and I had written something, and then it was like 4 months later when I was reading it in front of a workshop, and as I was reading, I was like, wow, this is pretty good. I wrote this? Wow. So it's that whole thing of distancing. Even when I finish the first draft, I put it aside, and I'll forget about it for a month. Then I'll go back. I finish the second draft. I'll set it aside for a month. Ray Bradbury used to say, set it aside in the bottom drawer for a year. I can't afford to do that. But that distance is very important, and I make it a point to totally forget about it because my subconscious is working in that way, and it's something I've trained myself to do over all these years now. So it's that tapping in and trusting, knowing that you don't know. I kid people, they'll say, well, I don't know anything, and I'll tell them, you're the most brilliant person in the room. Because you're admitting you don't know, you're the smartest of all, in my opinion, So it's this whole process, and it's very addicting. I'm warning you right now. I've gone through it. I'm better at it now. But when I'd finish a book and I'd be done with it, I would freaking go through postpartum depression. All these people or stories or concepts or ideas, they're part of my life, aren't there anymore. And I'm scrambling. I don't know what to do with myself. And one of the only solutions I have discovered is to start a new project. And it gets worse as you go. So I'm giving you a warning right now. You're going to be a junkie. If you're not already, you probably already are. You're playing drums and shit. You're probably already a junkie. But out of all the things I've done, among them, one of my favorite being ayahuasca, I can honestly say that now writing is my favorite altered state. Stuff that comes out, when it comes out, it's just like magic. I'm like, wow. And oftentimes, my hands can't keep up with my brain. And so I always tell my writing students, puke on the page. Don't even worry about punctuation and all that shit. You can do that later because people have a tendency, because of the way we've been trained academically, to want to fix everything. And it interrupts the flow. So the flow is the most important thing. The hell with the rest of it. That's what editing is for. And I used to do like a dozen edits. Now I do 3 to 4. But everything is combined in those things. And that's just come over the time through my experience. And then it comes out and I'm like, wow, holy mackerel. Wow, that's great. I wrote that. It's my children. I'm happy with it. So
do you have any rituals of approach before you usually sit down to write?
Well, there's a whole writer's cliche because you always have to go through procrastination. You know, my laundry's done, my room is cleaned. I'm not a bed maker, but, you know, everything's lined, the pencils are in the right place, this and that. And then I found with myself personally, now over time, that if I get up in the morning and I get myself together and I get my coffee and I hit it without anything else, no internet, no flake book, no, you know, email, and just hit it. That's when I get the purest essence of it. When I was writing Land Without Evil, I was working full time as a corporate IT manager. I had 25 technicians in 18 buildings. We took care of the LANs, the WANs, the cables, the hubs, the routers, the servers, the desktops, blah, 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 all that stuff. It was very demanding. So I made myself, for almost a year, I got up at 4:30 in the morning and get myself together, and I'd write for a few hours before work. And they could have whatever was left of my brain at that point. But when it was fresh like that is what's always worked the best for me. You know, you come out of sleeping and dreaming, and your mind is kind of cleared out, or I'm foggy, but get a little bit of caffeine happening. And then I've got really caught in the trap. It's not really a trap, and it's been called writer's crack. But if I'm really boogieing full-time on a book, whether I'm writing my own or I'm editing, I edit for people and all that, in the morning I have the coffee and I get going, and then I would make myself wait until 4:20. Then in the afternoon, when the caffeine's wearing off and I'm brittle and it doesn't do anymore, I take a couple of hits of some cannabis, and I will get a whole second wind of creativity. And I'll crank out like I know 3 more pages that I might not have gotten. So then when I'm really crazy on a book, it's coffee in the morning, cannabis, coffee, cannabis, and they play off of each other, you know? And when I'm in that mode, I also make myself take a walk between to keep everything moving and all that. Because walking when you're not thinking, when you're in what's been called the moving body, is when the things really come. So then I get into all that, and I'm spun up in all that, and then I'm smoking so much cannabis, it's not even freaking affecting me anymore. So then I force myself to take a break. Like right now, it's been 3 months since I smoked any. Because I've gotten the best stuff you can ever get anywhere. And you keep smoking it, and it doesn't hardly affect you. It's like, what a waste, right? So for me, it's time to take a break. And I always tell people, if you're getting high all the time, whether you're tripping or doing this or that, or you're smoking and you're doing that all the time, if you take a break and you go back to baseline consciousness becomes an altered state. So, you know, I've learned to navigate in that way. And one of the keys to ayahuasca and psychedelic experiences and shamanic experiences is all about navigation. So I navigate those states. And as I said, writing is my favorite.
Yeah, I like what you were saying about it was interesting what you were saying about the editing process, because it made me reflect on how I've been working lately. And what seems to be working the best for me, or I get in the best flow, is when I just dump everything onto the page. And it's actually through the editing process that I'm finding more, I don't know whether it's more interesting or I get in more of a flow during that process. But there's something about going through what I've already just chucked onto the page and in that editing process where things start to take more of a shape, more of a form.
Yep.
It's like I'm infusing more life into it, and that seems to be the best way that's working for me at the moment.
Absolutely. So every time when you go through successive edits, you're looking at it with a different set of eyes. So, you know, one of my edits might be search and destroy adverbs. Or you suddenly realize that paragraph 3 is your opening paragraph, or chapter 4 is actually a better first chapter than the other one, because it doesn't come out necessarily in the right order. You get on a thought, and then it starts to expand, and then you're just, blah, 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 you know, you're going away like a madman, right? But after you've had some time, and then you've had that initial thought or that inspiration, and then it's also had more time to gestate and grow and develop. And even sometimes in like a third draft, I'm like, oh, wow, I can say this so much better this way, you know, and I'll restructure the sentence and move the paragraph around it. It's like, yeah, you know, the key, among others, is to say more with less. And as I'm often quoted as saying, and anything I say, I don't think is original. I probably stole it from somebody. That's part of it. But the act of reading is an act of co-creation between the writer and the reader. So in writing, we want to put in what we call significant details, just enough so that the reader can bring their own experience to it and bring their own interpretation to it to create that reality between the two. It's actually a joint effort. When you become very much aware of that and you're giving those significant details and really making every word count, then the reader can have a wonderful experience. You know, there's a whole thing, if you ever did it in school or not when you were a kid, but they would start a sentence at the beginning of the classroom and pass it all through everybody in the classroom. And then by the time the last person gets to the end of the last person in the row of all that, it's completely changed from what it was originally, right? Mm-hmm. So everybody brings their own interpretation. So if I were to write a story about domestic abuse, for example, it's going to be taken completely different from somebody who's actually experienced it directly as opposed to somebody who hasn't. So you want to put enough in there for them to latch on to without overdoing it. And I like to think of it as each word is the stroke of a brush on the mind, on the palette of the mind, but it's dynamic. And how you do that and how you paint it helps the person guide them. And then if you have a really powerful thought, then you do a paragraph break. That gives them a mental breather. So, okay, let that thought sink in. Then you jump in again. You know, there's tons of things like that that are there. And this is what I've learned from some of the best writers ever. I've been so blessed to have them as mentors. You know, they've taught me so much. I feel very lucky. And I feel very old school, too. Some of this stuff, there's all these programs that will write a plot for you and this and that. You know, to me, it takes away from the organic process. I don't like it at all. It makes me a little crazy. But hey, I'm a little crazy. I'll own it, you know?
For sure. You've got that Boston streak, mate. There's no getting rid of that.
No, you can take the boy out of Dorchester, but you can't take Dorchester out of the boy.
For sure. Well, look, we've been going for an hour and a half now, so I think this might be a good place to wrap things up. What I'm going to do is have all of your links and everything in the show notes for everyone who wants to check everything out. But to finish up, what would you leave all of us with when it comes to the greater themes of what we've been talking about? Or maybe for someone who wants to deepen into or explore the path of shamanism?
Something that I've been saying repeatedly during the course of our discussion is ultimately, in the end, you are the ultimate judge. Follow your heart. You can learn things from books. You can have revelations from books. But the truth, the center, really is in the heart. And the heart is where integrity lies. And the heart is really the seat of being conscious with conscience. And listen to everything. Take it all in. But you can divine the truth within it. You can look at different organized religions and this and that, and you can find the truth in there. You are you. So follow that and trust in yourself. And I really appreciate you indulging me and listening to me babble here and provoking me in the best way. And you mentioned you'll put the links in and all that. I have a lot of content on my website. Podcasts, lectures, videos, radio, TV shows, blah, 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 with touching on all these things we've discussed. So there's a lot of stuff there for people that they can access for free. And of course, if they go and buy all my books for everybody they know in the whole cosmos, it wouldn't upset me, but you know, just saying.
Added bonus.
Yes, sir. So thank you so much. And I will help spread the word. We're both, you and I are kindred spirits. We're on the same path. No question. I love your energy. I love all my brothers from down under. I call them my brothers from down under, you guys, and they've been calling me their mate from the States, and I feel deeply honored. I don't take that lightly. So thank you so much for your time and your energy and your effort.
Yeah, likewise. Back to you, mate. Mm-hmm.
Hey, brother.
Yeah. All right, brother. Well, we're going to cut it off right here. So that was really enjoyable for me, mate. Really appreciate you coming on. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Me too. Yeah. I freaking love you Aussies, man. You guys are great.
Yeah, something about, I don't know what it is. Maybe the carefree kind of something about our nature that seems to be inherent within a lot of Australians. I don't know if you can put words to it or not based on what you've experienced.
It's the energy. You guys are really open, and I say shit that people will run away from me here. You guys like, yeah, mate, I get it, right? And I'm like, yes, somebody knows what I'm talking about. Somebody gets me. So, and once
sure.
you post all this, I will be spreading it.
Cool.
Far
Yeah,
and
I
wide.
appreciate that, mate. I appreciate that.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. No, you do a great job. For what it's worth, you're a very good interviewer.
Oh, mate, well, it's
I've
early days, isn't it? I'm still learning how to navigate this whole thing. It's a weird phenomena having to sit in the hot seat, as we
yeah.
might language it, and be the host and try and get this conversation to flow, especially through digital means as well, because it's, for me, I might say that in some sense it seems to be very unnatural, because despite what the appearance might be during our conversation, I actually don't talk all that much during regular life. I sit a lot in silence. So speaking it's not something that I've really ever considered myself to be naturally gifted at. I've always thought of myself to be more of a writer. So it is stepping outside of my comfort zone, having these conversations and speaking on the fly.
Yeah, no, you're very good. I've been on both sides of it. I've interviewed hundreds of people, and I've been interviewed by hundreds of people. And I know when it's happening, when it isn't, when there's a connect, and when there's a really good dialogue going. And I just want to really reiterate for you that you're very, very good. You got it going on. We had a fucking great conversation. We had a great connect. Boom, boom, boom. And maybe some point up the road, when you're legendary and famous and you're ruling over Australia, we can do this again.
Yeah, well, we'll see what the stars have aligned, for both of us.
There you go. We'll see how the mystery unfolds.
Absolutely.